Hey everyone, welcome to the second episode of the MarketLeaf Solutions Legal Marketing Podcast. Here again with my friend and colleague, Matt Holmes. Matt, thanks again for joining us this week. Thought we'd cover a topic that's on everyone's mind, and it's always important when it comes to people who are looking for ways to not spend any more money, but get better success rates on their marketing campaigns and ultimately bring in more clients. And that is conversion rate optimization, or CRO. And I know you, my friend, are a CRO specialist or guru, as I like to call you. So it's perfect that we have you on today. And, I thought a lot of people they're more familiar with SEO, right? And they're thinking about search engine optimization and getting people to their site, whether it's organically or maybe through paid ads. But they're not always necessarily thinking about the little tweaks and the little optimizations it takes to ultimately convert those clients, right? Sometimes with everything going on and on people's plates, it just seems like getting people to your website is a victory in and of itself. So thought that CRO is a great topic for us to cover today, and thought it might just be helpful if you could give us maybe a couple minutes on your thoughts on what CRO really means, especially nowadays with the million different types of campaigns and tools and tactics we can all run. So let's just start there.
Sure. Well, first, thanks so much. And it's always a pleasure to be on. Um, the thing about CRO or conversion rate optimization is this is really a tactic that you can kind of deploy right away, even if you have not many dollars to dedicate, maybe a little bit of time, maybe a little bit of, hey, I want to just get better and understand how to improve site conversions. Conversion rate optimization is your best friend, right? If you think about it, the average website has about a 2 to 3% conversion rate. Some do much better than that, obviously, and many do quite a bit poorer than that. So even if you're less modest and say it's a 3% conversion rate, that's 97% of your traffic that is not converting, right? And so I just I laugh to myself when I see so many new businesses or people just getting started in marketing, and they spend a lot of money to acquire the customer, right, or to drive traffic, and they keep trying to convert cold traffic. But if we spend a little bit more time focusing resources and effort at converting more of the traffic that's already coming to you, and trying to find new ways to convert them, and trying to find out, if you think of people who visit your site, if you think of your site as a funnel, there could be maybe leaks in that funnel that you might want to learn how to plug, and plugging those leaks through proper CRO will help you when you do decide to, in earnest, adopt a paid strategy, because now you'll have a funnel with fewer leaks, and you'll have a lot less waste when you do start driving a lot more cold traffic. So those are just a few quick thoughts on CRO. I'm a fan of it. I think that's a great place to start if you're if you're looking to improve but don't want to spend a lot of money to do it. This is a great place to start.
I certainly think that last point there on the efficiency of it and the fact that it really does save you both time and cost in the long run is ultimately probably the most important factor when it comes to implementing a full CRO process. And we laugh because it's always depressing when you start hearing that 97% of your traffic on even the great sites isn't converting, right? And that's just the reality of the nature of conducting business online these days. And it's just with more and more sites and more people jumping into the space, it really is more competitive than ever. You touched on a couple of things, Matt, of talking about the different optimizations and taking a look at kind of your full process, right? Rather than kind of just spending a bunch of money for paid ads or whatever it may be. I think one thing that often gets overlooked, and I know I've certainly overlooked it in the past, when I was starting my career, is just the fact that you do have to look at CRO from both kind of an art and science perspective, right? In my mind, it is very process driven,
Oh, sure.
And
I think I'm going to agree with this. Yeah. Yeah. I
yeah,
think,
and
yeah.
you certainly have to take a look at how a customer is funneling through your sales funnel or through your website, right? And you understand how is someone initially getting to your site? What are they doing once they're on your site? What are you asking them to do when they're on your site? And then ultimately, what's the next step from there? And I think, you know, that really comes down to kind of a process based approach or a systematic approach. But the art part comes in when you start thinking about the customer story and the customer journey and why you're even targeting this particular type of person in the first place. And I think a lot of times, maybe when people are doing CRO or they're starting out in the space or trying to implement some of these things, they kind of forget that there's this innate connection between the customer story, the customer journey, kind of that qualitative aspect, and then the quantitative, process driven, systematic approach to it as well, right? And you really can't have one be effective without the other. So, have you maybe you can speak a little bit to the fact that, how would a first time person or first time marketer or someone doing this for a law firm or practice who's trying to implement these things think about the customer story or customer journey first, or in this case, a client journey,
Mhm.
and then apply that in a more practical, process driven approach?
Yeah. I think if you are a lawyer and you have a specific target, let's call it, you're doing divorces, you're a divorce attorney. Um, I think after conducting business for a period of time, you'll start to find that there's an archetype, right, of your ideal customer. Your Some would say an ideal customer profile, right, or an ICP. And with that ICP, you can define, okay, what is it that makes a strong customer? I can look at my database and say, okay, what are some commonalities and what's uh, helped foster some of the strongest relationships that I have right now when it comes to my client base? And they may be some commonalities that are archetypical or across the board. Maybe it happens to be a certain gender of a certain age from a specific neighborhood with specific causality, right? My husband
Right.
wants too much. He's had an affair with his assistant. Across the board, you might realize that, hey, I've got a specific type of client that comes my way, and now that I know this, how can I use this information to scale my business, right? And so if we think about it like that, that was the hard part, is analyzing and figuring out what your ideal customer looks like. The easy part is talking to them in a way that they would find attractive so that more of them convert, when they come to your website. So, if you happen to have an archetypical or a persona or an ideal customer, let that person see themselves when they come to your site, right? When they come to speak to your people on the front lines, perhaps they're emotional, perhaps they've got specific, issues that need to be addressed. And if you can address those up front, head on, without them even mentioning them, you've kind of proven that you kind of understand where they're coming from. You've already bought some instant kind of credibility, which is really what this is all about, right? People like talking to people that they assume will understand them and what they need, right? And if you can prove that you understand that and you can help them solve their issues, and that you're competent enough to do it because you've seen this before, then you're going to convert a lot more people, right? And so it really is 1 + 1 = 2, right? Figure out what your ideal customer looks like, figure out exactly how they need to be spoken to gain credibility, and to reassure them really that you're the right person to help, right? And you'll end up converting a lot more people. And so I don't want to ramble too much on this one topic, is you can go down the rabbit hole easily, and I know we have lots to discuss. But one thing specifically I wanted to call out was an easy way to think about this is using the analogy of a website almost being like your brick and mortar store, right? So if a customer came in, and a lot of them come in to browse, and not all of them um, buy something on the way out, right? But say you've got I don't know, a 1,000 square foot store, right? As a shopkeeper, you should be able to maybe keep an eye on who's coming and who's going, and try to build a rapport with those in the store. And you might see somebody go that had been inspecting a specific vase for like 35 minutes, and you leave without, like, hey, excuse me, were you interested in that vase? You seem kind of, interested in it. You're looking at it a long time. Uh,
Right.
is it is it the price? Because I might be able to work with you on it. You see these same tactics in e-commerce these days, when somebody leaves something in their cart, and then maybe a couple hours later, or 24 hours later, Amazon's like, did you forget that thing?
Oh
Right?
yeah, we've all gotten those emails.
Yeah. And then other sites might even say, if you want to grab it like right now in the next hour, I'll give you even another 15% off, just for grabbing it now. And there's whole classes that are taught on retargeting in e-commerce using these same tactics, but it's really just a digital recreation of what's already happening in real life. So anyone who finds this topic hard to wrap their head around, I would simplify it for yourself by pretending you're a shopkeeper, right? And what are the things that you would do innately to try to woo someone back, or to attract some business, or to encourage repeat business, or to refer business from others? All these things you can do online. And I bet we'll talk about a few ways to do that successfully the balance of the show here. But just my 2 cents on it.
Oh, absolutely. And I love the example you gave of thinking about your website, or more broadly speaking, your online sales funnel in terms of a storefront or even your office, right? Attorneys are accepting walk-ins, perhaps not in COVID days, but
Yeah.
back in normal times. But that really provides a great visual element for how to think about CRO in your sales funnel in general, right? Because are you visually seeing the people coming into your office or coming onto your website that you really want to be there? It's in a ultra competitive online environment, especially in the legal space. You really want and really need to make sure that you are targeting the right people, because if you're running paid ads, if you're using retargeting through a Facebook pixel, or anything of that nature, it's just too expensive to not have the right targets, right, and the right demographics, the right type of clients that you're ultimately trying to bring in, and who are you know clients who move the needle for your firm as well. The clients with maybe larger case values, or longer term relationships where we can work on multiple matters for them. And I think that the being able to visualize who those people are is really important, because then that guides the process of taking a look at your website, or taking a look at your phone scripts. And a lot of times, a lot of this stuff happens from someone visiting a website, but then trying to schedule an appointment with an attorney, or calling to get more information, et cetera, right? It's not just even necessarily what you're seeing when you first pull up your company's website. It's what's the process, or what's the experience that the
So glad
potential
you said
client
that.
is having going through a phone call with someone from your team, right? But you have to think about what that person's motivations are, what their ultimate goal is, what problems they're having, what obstacles that you, as an attorney, or you as a customer service person, if it's someone answering the phone on your team, need to consider to help them get to where they want to go, right? And I think that's ultimately what it requires. A lot of work, it requires a lot of time. But to your point, Matt, you take a look at who some of your previous successful clients have been, who you've enjoyed working with, who's been moving the needle from a bottom line perspective, and that helps you narrow it down, right? It's not like the information isn't available to you. It's just a matter of really thinking about who that client process involves. Want to touch a little bit more on kind of the phone experience because it is such a large part of legal marketing and really marketing in general. Because a lot of times when people are looking at your website, they then want to take the next step of actually talking to someone from your team.
It's a
And
complex sale. Yeah, you're not just buying a simple widget, right? It's with 5 reviews or 100 reviews or whatever. It's yeah, it's
absolutely,
different.
absolutely. And I think a lot of times that piece gets overlooked because people kind of think, all right, I got them to the website, I got them to give me a call. From here I can wrap it up, right? I can close the deal. And that's ultimately not often the case because especially with legal matters, people, as you mentioned, are coming in with complex emotions, particularly if it is a matter of family law or divorce law or like a child custody case, for example,
Sure. Yeah.
or estate planning, wills, things for the future, right? Maybe they're suffering some sort of traumatic health event or they're trying to take care of their family members or loved ones going forward, and those are all very complex emotional situations. And I think the need to have empathy and communicate a certain level of understanding and commitment to serving as a guide to those prospects to help them get through their particular legal journey is really important. And some of that stuff I think definitely gets lost, and um, is one of the most susceptible areas or prime areas for CRO type improvements, um, whether it's through the sales script, whether it's through kind of training for the people answering the phone in your office for these types of calls. That's one of the biggest areas I know we've seen in terms of being able to make a more substantial impact through CRO type improvements. But what are some other areas that maybe you've seen, Matt, whether it's on the phone process or the website or maybe even an email copy or social media ads, etc.? What are a few areas that you really think maybe get overlooked and are some prime suspects, so to speak, for some conversion rate optimizations?
Yeah. Um, so I'll piggyback on your phone commentary because I think that's a super overlooked kind of part of the process. And when people, um, riff about CRO, 9 times out of 10, 99% of the time, they're talking about website only. But we're talking about the entire funnel, right? And the complex sale that requires the website to draw them in and convert them as far as an appointment, but that's still having to take place through a human being, either for screening procedures or to pair them with the appropriate attorney, whatever the case may be. Your front line needs to be armed with the skills to um, have empathy. They need to be able to ask the right questions, and they need to be able to book the appointment. Right? You're paying dollars likely either through SEO, foundational work, or through some paid ads, PPC or what have you. And you're going to need to convert as many people as you possibly can. And this is a very overlooked part of things because, I'll maybe see people paying people that staff the phones, maybe not a great wage, but if they were in a sales role in a different company, which is kind of the same thing, they'd be making a lot more money, right? So sometimes the incentives are off. Sometimes they haven't been given the training that they need. And so they're kind of, I don't know, meandering through the role instead of understanding that what they sound and how they sound will absolutely, impact results. And sometimes it's just a management thing where they haven't quite understood how all the pieces fit together, and they haven't, provided the tool. This might go back to training again, but sometimes the management needs training too,
Oh,
as far as
absolutely.
how to
Right.
set
It's never usually a
expectations.
one-way street.
Yes, exactly. So, a little bit holistically, but if you got people involved, it's not like, again, like e-commerce where you can change a bit of copy here and see what happens in 30 days and know that you've kind of completed an A/B test that was, statistically significant. There's so much variance in human behavior, right? And there's so much, you know, there's motivational things. There's things like, hey, people get sick and, life gets in the way. And I mean, there's just so many more variables that it's really important to have a little bit more rigor with respect to how things should be done, especially with the frontline people. If you can nail your frontline people, your website could almost be trash. I'd say that lightly, but you know, if you got a phone number and someone found you, right? That was the bare minimum that the website kind of needed to do in that moment. Maybe there's some credibility stuff after the fact, but it's that person on the phone that's going to make it or break it, and even if you have a fantastic looking site, if that someone that answers the phone isn't, chipper or empathetic, um, or both,
Right.
it's going to hurt you, right? And so I'll leave it there, but that's a layer that a lot of people forget about, and it's easy to, but don't, just because it's not part of the buzzwords that are flying around right now. It's just kind of business 101. Make sure that all your frontline people are as well trained as they can be.
Right. And I think it is a matter sometimes of just the maybe even the dollars that people see are associated with the cost of building a website or running advertising or you know paying an SEO agency to get them set up with the right Google rankings, right, as opposed to what it would take to train a frontline person or maybe spend a little extra money to find, recruit, and hire the right frontline person, right? I would argue that that last dollar, if you're going to spend it somewhere, put it towards either training or recruiting the right sales professional for the phone, as opposed to spending a little extra on your website, right? Because as you touched on, the website is really just a medium to get people on the phone for the most part, to get them to a more personal interaction where you can really exhibit that empathy, exhibit that understanding of their customer journey or their customer problem, and then get them to commit to your solution as the right solution, right? And
The
so,
people adds it right to the phone, right? And they have success with it. And if they're making a profit at it, I'm glad they are. So some people are circumventing the website altogether just with their pay piece pay per click programs, excuse me. Um, so yeah, the phone game's got to be tight.
definitely,
And then
definitely. And I think it just gets overlooked, right? Because it's not easy to find good salespeople. It's not easy to do that training. We've both been there. We've done trainings ourselves. We've administered trainings. We've seen it all, right? When it comes to being able to, you know, really have access to high quality sales training. And ultimately some of it just comes down to having the right personality characteristics too. A lot of people are uncomfortable selling, they're uncomfortable asking some of the harder questions, but those questions that are needed to really get to the heart of a matter or to make sure that the customer understands that you understand what they're going through too. And it, requires a lot of emotional intelligence, quite frankly. And so that's not always easy to find in the right people. So
So that's the
um,
art part when we talk about the art and science of CRO. That's
absolutely.
it's in the copy, it's in the talent that you hire, it's in the training that they get. That's the art part, right? The science part is, once you have your numbers for how many clients that come through the door you actually are able to book, and how many of those are going to turn into clients that are good clients that aren't a pain in the butt, and then how many of those will actually refer you new business, and you come up with a metric that you can use to forecast your growth for months and years to come, assuming everything kind of stays the same. And so that's the science part, and that's I think to a point you made earlier. Uh, that science actually happens a lot easier when the art's dialed in correctly. Like conversion rates go up, and so you just start to multiply those things out accordingly. And when you haven't built the credibility through the the high touch stuff, like speaking to the personas or by giving your frontline folks the right training, then you'll never know if the science was really valid anyway, because you half-assed the other really good stuff that you need
Right.
part of the formula, right?
That's exactly right. And maybe your science part, so to speak, is really good, but if it's not aligned to the more art art piece of it, the customer story, the customer journey, that understanding, then it doesn't really matter because you're targeting, your science will never apply to really convert the right folks, right? And that's ultimately a huge issue, and we see that all the time. And I think we've all gone through it ourselves at one point or another. Matt, with an eye on keeping everything practical, because that's always, we always try to keep it practical here on the Legal Marketing Podcast. I think a big question that we always get is, when people are coming to a legal website, oftentimes they're seeing a couple different options, mostly focused on getting someone on the phone, as we touched on. Sometimes that is a submit a form function where people are asked to provide some personal information, provide a little bit of background on their case or legal matter, and then submit it, right? And it's up to a law firm to then follow up by phone or email, whatever it may be. The other option that we see is a live chat, which oftentimes is run through a bot. It's very rarely an actual human sitting behind a computer responding to you, but they're pretty well programmed bots that come back with some template answers and ultimately try to get you to schedule an appointment that way, right?
Mhm.
I think there are pros and cons to each approach, and I've gotten this question a lot recently. Is there a preferred method? What should we be asking for in the form? What should we be asking in the chat function, et cetera? And so I've given this more thought. We've kind of run some tests over time and looking at a lot of different law firm pages. And this is kind of where the nitty gritty, more science part of the CRO plan or CRO tactic comes into play in my mind. And I think things of asking for the right types of information, um, you know even placement on the page, etc., are really key things, right? And if you don't have the experience or you haven't looked at a lot of data, some of that stuff can be more difficult to really parse through or to understand. From your experience, you know in more general terms, because it always differ per each company's particular website, but what are some kind of general buckets that you look at in terms of, these are red flags that if you have this on your website or you're
Sure.
not considering this, it's kind of trouble, right? And it's likely hurting your conversion rates.
Yeah.
What are some of those big buckets and some of the first things that you look for when you're viewing a website for the first time?
Sure. Well, I think again, you have to maybe do a little role playing and then put yourself in the buyer's shoes. And anymore, the buyers will be doing a lot more research before they even pick up the phone call than they ever have in the past. There's just so much information readily available because of websites and because of review sites and things like that, that buyers are sophisticated. So when you're designing your site, you have to make sure that if the buyer decides not to stay, that you have a plan for that. So that's a mistake number one. If you don't have a plan for if they decide not to stay, which as we said is about 98% of the people. So we'll talk about that in a second. John knows what I'm talking about. And then we have to make sure that when they are there, that we have to do something attractive and we have to do it quickly. And so there's a number of ways to do that. But a big mistake I see people make is they put a lot of the good stuff below the fold for some reason. And what I mean by below the fold is that area of the website that's below the main screen, where you would have to scroll to kind of see below what's native to the home screen, right? It's a publishing term, right? If you were looking at a newspaper, above the fold would be the most valuable content, and below the fold would be lesser so, even on the front page, right? That makes sense. So because people these days that shop online, if your site is slow, they're going to go. If you're not saying something compelling in the first, 10% of scrolling, you've got a strong, possibility that they're going to leave. And so just make sure that whatever compelling information you have, maybe points of differentiation, your phone number, what you specialize in, why they should be working with you instead, any type of testimonials, get as much of that as you can. Not in a crowded sort of way, in a well thought out way, but get as much of it as you can above the fold so that you make an impact right away with more of the right. So that's one big mistake I see people make. To go back to the first mistake, I say that's really retargeting we're talking about, for the 97% of folks that aren't going to stay. Um, a lot of times there's myriad reasons why they're not staying. They got sidetracked and had to fly off to something else. They're doing some shopping while they're on the train on their mobile phone, which is, by the way, how most people shop, right? So it makes you even more fickle if things are hard to read or if it's a slow page load time, right? So those are easy things to fix on your website. You just hire a company to do that, but it's not hard to figure out, right? Those are things that are readily addressable, and making the mobile experience better is a great way to easily boost your conversion rates, because that's the biggest way people are shopping these days. So a lot of people shop maybe on mobile, but a lot of them also maybe do the purchasing on desktop, but because maybe that's where the credit card information has to come in. For most law firms, that conversion isn't really a purchase per se. That's really just booking an appointment. So if we can talk about the chat bots a bit, I'm not a huge fan of chatbots. They're, I put that the wrong way. They serve their purpose for different things, right? But I don't like booking appointments through chatbots because I think, depending on the type of practice that you have, there's gonna be a lot of questions at the front end, and I think you need a strong phone person to handle some of those. I do think chatbots are helpful for those tire kickers who are trying to get some information, and you just need to send them on their way to an FAQ page on your site, or to the calendar for someone to book an appointment, or to route them to a whole different department that that phone number is not really intended to handle anyway.
Oh,
Right?
definitely.
So
Definitely.
let your chatbot play traffic cop, but any of that money traffic, I think it needs to go to a human being.
I think you touched on a really great point, is that chatbots are good for a certain function. A lot of my concern with using them is it gets back to our point earlier that a lot of times, depending on the type of law you're in, really even in general, you're dealing with delicate situations for the most part, right? Or confidential or proprietary situations. And people feel particularly vulnerable. And it's not easy for them to necessarily give up some of the information that they need to for the sake of their matter, but that there's still that level of uncomfort with disclosing certain things, right? And I think, to your point, that's where you really need to have someone on the phone where it's an authentic human conversation. You can really, through vocal inflection and through diction and certain things, get across that message of understanding, of empathy, compassion, et cetera, because you put prospects in a place where they become more comfortable sharing that sensitive information. And I think that's one of the biggest things you lose out on with a chatbot. Yes, you gain a lot with convenience, right? It's easy for people to just type some things in, and there is conflicting research in terms of even generationally, as you start working with clients more who are younger and of the digital age, sometimes they feel more comfortable sharing things via text or via, typing in by computer as opposed to speaking over the phone. So some of that is generational, but I'd say for the most part, when it comes to a sensitive legal matter, you really need to have that authentic human connection to put people in a place where they are more comfortable sharing that type of information.
Yeah. I think on our last podcast, we touched on, 60% of people are looking for referrals when they seek out a lawyer, right? And so to ruin that by having a machine misinterpret what you were trying to say because you thought it was one of those bots that could intelligently answer all your questions, and instead it was, no, I can program to answer one of three questions, and any other stuff you type in, I'm going to spit back a bunch of gibberish, and you're going to have a completely horrid experience, and you're not going to think very highly. And then the person that was struggling to get more business through referrals and actually won one lost one because they didn't have good frontline people handling that hot lead. And so that's the kind of story actually I see lots. Right?
Oh,
And
too often.
you just want to make sure you're not shooting yourself in the foot. Whenever possible with this kind of stuff, and I think it's just good to not try to be cute, right? I think it's good to again think about things in the most simple way. And if you were a customer, how would you want that experience to be? And I think it's also necessary to be like innately curious about ways you can remove friction from the consideration stage here, right? Maybe that I'm problem aware and I know I need a lawyer. Why am I picking you? What is it about you? What questions might I have? How can you answer those questions for me? The more you can spoon feed me information, honestly, to help me make a dang decision, the more I'm going to look at you as the thought leader, because you helped me get to the decision. So I'm automatically thankful before we've even done business together. And that's a pretty powerful psychological motivator for doing business, is if you've already kind of done them a solid in a major way, which is kind of help them solve a mental block or a psychological block of sorts, which is how am I going to solve this problem? You brought them a little bit closer, and there's going to be a little bit of kind of reciprocity, I would suspect, in a lot of cases after you've kind of coached them like that.
Oh, definitely. And really what it comes down to is to get to that level of understanding or to be able to think about your client or your client's needs at that level, it really comes down to having been one of two things, right? Either you've experienced the problem yourself or you've spoken with enough clients that you've worked with in the past or enough prospects in a particular area with a particular problem to really get at the multi-layered kind of complexity or multi-layered understanding of why they're really approaching you in the first place, right? I mean, it's one thing to have gone through the problem yourself, but if not, as a lot of people do in the course of business, maybe they haven't experienced the customer journey themselves, then it gets especially important to just get out and talk to people, right? And for the most part, that you start with your former clients, the people that you've worked with and hopefully done a good job for and maintained a good relationship with, and ultimately, if you've brought a good result to them or done good work for those people, then they'll want to share that with you, right? They'll want to share their thought process for how they were thinking when they first were looking to hire an attorney, or what they were thinking, or what persuaded them to ultimately hire you, right? Those are the types of data points that are really critical when it comes to CRO. And I think sometimes that gets overlooked. Sometimes we just look at what feedback or what information we're seeing from the people who, we're trying to win over, right? The people who are visiting our website, or people who haven't called, or the people who scheduled an appointment but didn't show up. But a lot of times the answers to those questions, often lie with the people who did choose you, right? The people who did ultimately work with you, because you can either see the similarities or differences then, and you learn to play up certain aspects, or you learn to downplay maybe certain aspects of your company that caused hesitation for some folks. And so I think the retrospective look, or the look at kind of the full customer life cycle for when people have actually chosen you, is arguably just as important as the people who haven't chosen you, because ultimately you have to get to the different kind of customer perspectives that are being brought when people are evaluating your firm. So kind of to that end, Matt, are there any maybe tools or recommendations that you would suggest for people to kind of get at the heart of some of those customer perspectives, or get to some of that feedback or data that can ultimately help them determine how they should make updates to their website or their call script or whatever it may be?
Absolutely. Everything just needs to be intentional, right? And I think when people do referral programs, or are looking for ways to ask existing clients for a favor or a referral of some kind, the fact that it was a surprise, maybe makes the asker feel just a little bit like greasy about it, like, oh, by the way, can you help me out with this? And you already paid me money, right? And I'm going to ask you for something else.
Right.
Like, um, and the fact that it kind of feels maybe sneaky because you asked for it at the end instead of mentioning it at the front end. So I find myself repeating this a lot, but Um, I think it's important to tell people that referrals are a big part of how you stay in business and that we enjoy serving you and we'll think we'll do a great job by you. And at the end of this, hopefully we'll get through it together very, very well and we'll have, good results. And when we do, I sure hope that you can think of a couple people that you could, throw my way for the future, you know, and it doesn't have to be anything more than that. Just like, hey, look, I'm in business. If you like doing business with me, you want to keep seeing me around.
Right. Oh, absolutely. And I think, the intentional aspect of it is important, and it's hard to get to that unless you do have that deep understanding of the customer story. Again, with a view of trying to make it practical, because it's always what we're trying to do here with the Legal Marketing Podcast. I like to just go over one or two tools kind of per week that people can look into and maybe decide to use to help them with their CRO. And this week I've really kind of honed in on two different ones. Hotjar, HOTJAR, hotjar.com, definitely check it out, is one tool I've used in the past to do heat mapping on a website, both for a client and for our own company as well. And I love it because heat mapping is just a visual representation of really how people are interacting on your website. So you, just like the weather map, you can see the Doppler, I should say, you can see where there's a lot of activity and little activity, and it'll show you that for every page on your website. So for most firms, you could just run it on your home page and you could see exactly how people are moving their cursor, are clicking on different aspects of your site. Um, and as Matt touched on before, really, if everything should be above the fold, and you'll see a significant drop off below where you would start scrolling. And so this gives you great visual feedback about how people are actually clicking on your form or clicking on your testimonial video or whatever it may be. And so it's really easy to understand quickly the type of changes that you need to make. You can do this for free too through another tool called heatmap.com. I also like using some screen recording software, and that just a lot of times will show you visually as well how people are actually engaging on your site. The heat map's great for clicks and click rates on different areas of the website, but screen recording is awesome for how someone will actually scroll through your site, look at different pages, the progression in which they're doing that. You can do that through Hotjar and other tools like that as well. So those are just a couple things I'd recommend. If you are trying to do this more for maybe some quick offers or something, and you don't want to do it for a full website, you can use a tool called Unbounce, which is really just more for landing pages. As Matt touched on, you don't need to have a terribly complex site. Really, you're just trying to get people kind of on the phone and talking to your top sales folks. And so, a landing page, which is really just a simple website, is a great way to do that. And you get a lot of these analytics tools if you build it through something like Unbounce, unbounce.com. I've seen plans from them for roughly $99 a month, which is pretty reasonable compared to what you'd spend to have a web developer build out a whole big website for you. But just one option, and it comes with a lot of great analytics tools as well. So, Matt, those are just a couple things I like to touch on for today when it comes to getting that good feedback for CRO. But before we start closing up here in just a few minutes, any final thoughts on, just some things that people should consider when they're ultimately looking to start implementing some of these, kind of optimization tactics?
Yeah, you know what? I should probably follow up on a point I made earlier, and I can tack on some tools. So with respect to retargeting, uh, not everyone's going to convert, like we said, the first time they see you, but you're going to have to follow up in some kind of fashion, right? And one way that I like to follow up with folks is with content. And so I like to use push notifications for that. A lot of times folks will come and Google Google Chrome, that is, will offer the ability to opt in to push notifications from your site just through Chrome. And when people do that, and people kind of assume it's like the same as accepting like cookie permissions. So I get a lot of folks that opt in. And that's a great way for folks to stay in touch with you that haven't joined your email list, right? I think early, website owners sometimes find it hard to build their list and like, how do I actually get my content into the hands of people that have visited if they don't join my list? Push notifications are a great way to do that. So you can keep them in touch with, any new news or a case that was recently won, anything that's relevant and anything that kind of stay top of mind. There are a number of tools that do it. I think Push Crew's got one. There's a one tool called Subscribers that I actually use, and I have a good time using that. I get metrics in there. I can see click rates. I can kind of parse it by country even. There's lots of, functionality. So that's something you can try for free. And up into, I don't know, maybe about 1,000 subscribers you get before they start to kind of trying to tack on some fees and stuff. But I have a lot of success using that to convert folks and push them down funnel when my emails just aren't cutting through like I'd like them to. Email inboxes are quite cluttered these days. And then the other kind of retargeting tactic that's free, right? Let's talk free stuff. Would be the Facebook pixel, right? You can look up online how to install the Facebook pixel. It's just a little bit of code, and again, if you just want to have your website team handle that for you, they'll know how. And what that does, though, is give you the ability to retarget site visitors every time they open up Facebook, or maybe every other time if you don't want to be too annoying,
Right.
right? But I think we all know that when people are shopping, sometimes they're doing some comparative analysis, right? Am I going to buy my new, screwdriver at, Lowe's or Home Depot or Ace Hardware or True Value? I got to see what all the sales are, and I'm going to map it out. And who's going to give me the first time buyer discount and all the stuff. Buyers are very sophisticated these days. So if you want to get back at them and get like one last bite at the apple, have a retargeting program in place so that you can stay top of mind long term, but short term to kind of stay in their face and make sure that you're at least one of the choices when they decide to finally pick a law firm. So that's what I'd end on today.
No, that's a great point, Matt. And when it comes to retargeting, one last point there is a lot of people just don't do it frequently enough, right? Research changes on this every single year, but kind of the rule of thumb is at least 5 to 7 touch points, right? And so having the Facebook pixel is a great way to, track people who are coming to your site, because then you can run retargeting ads or you can run other social media content to those people to make sure that you are getting those touch points in so that you're staying top of mind and ultimately making that impression to work towards a better conversion rate down the road. So, Matt, a lot of great discussion here today on CRO. It's a crazy complex topic with the psychological aspects, the art, the science, the process. I feel like we could talk about this topic for hours, but I feel like we've given our listeners today a really good survey of a lot of those different pieces today. So appreciate you joining me again on the MarketLeaf Solutions
Oh,
Legal
anytime.
Marketing Podcast. It's always great to have you. And for our listeners, thanks again for tuning in with us today. Again, check out our website, marketleafsolutions.com, for more episodes, blogs, and other videos where we go through tips, tricks, and everything you need to know when it comes to sales and marketing for your legal practice. Thanks again. We'll look forward to having you join us again soon.